All right, welcome to all right. Is everybody all right? Welcome to Boomer Bongo Boulevard. Or maybe I should do it like people who have millions of followers. Welcome to Boomer Bongo Boulevard. I have many
Episode.
visitors to my station, my YouTube channel, but hey, smash that subscribe button so I will get to 2 million hits. I'm Mike, just Mike. Along with me is Ron, just Ron, and we have our own YouTube channel, and we're doing I guess it's sort of a
I guess
podcast.
we're not saying enough stuff to piss people off or something. That's the
Yeah,
only thing
that's
I
what
can
it is.
figure out.
We're making people mad. That's our objective.
Yeah.
But anyway, subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. We've got. I think last time I checked, we've been stuck on 23, and we'd like to go, 24, 25. And
Yeah.
if you do watch regularly, subscribe because it makes us look better. But anyway, tonight we're talking about just general sports topics that are of interest to us, and particularly maybe from back in the 60s, the old days, the way things used to
No.
be. And what is that Rush Limbaugh said? The way things ought to be, but the way things
Yeah.
used to be. And we're just going to talk a little bit about it, Ron. And what's the first thing you want to talk about sports-wise?
Well, it was something that I thought of that interests me, and that's defunct teams, particularly baseball teams, Major League Baseball teams. Uh, One of the first ones I always think of is, to me, the most interesting story is the Washington Senators. Which, people are going, Washington Senators, they're still a Washington team. They're the Nationals. Well, yeah, that's
No.
different. We'll get to that. But there was an original Washington Senators, and they were one of the original teams in the American League. They ran from 1901 to 1960. And then they moved and became the Minnesota Twins, who, of course, are still around and are generally a pretty good team. And they, win most of the time, whereas the Senators never won. But right after they got rid of that team and moved them, they decided to immediately make one of the very first expansion teams ever in Major League history, which was the new Washington Senators in 1961, very next year. And they lasted all of a big 10 years until 1971, when they moved to Arlington and became the Texas Rangers.
Texas Rangers, yeah.
So now there are two teams in Major League Baseball that both came from the Washington Senators, which is kind of weird.
Makes them like the team version of Half Brothers.
Yeah. And now the original hats that the Senators wore were like they were like dark blue, like navy blue with just kind of a block W. But when they became the Senators the second time, they wore a script W on a red hat, which when the Washington Nationals started playing, which also became from a defunct team, which was the Montreal Expos, moved to Washington and became
Oh,
the
I always
Washington
like the
Nationals.
Expos. I like that. I like that M, and they
Yeah,
seem like such a '70s
I know,
team.
it was such a cool logo.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
kind of
like
look at it, you couldn't really decide what it was right away, and you know. Um, But yeah,
well,
and the Nationals wear that same exact hat that the Senators wore in the '60s. That script W.
interesting. And
Yeah,
that's stuff
and
only
let's
old
see.
guys.
Oh
That's
yeah,
stuff
and then
only old guys know.
it, and it was like another thing about baseball. There was like uh, the Milwaukee Brewers came from another defunct team, which was the Seattle Pilots. And they were only around 1 year, and they had some of the most horrible uniforms ever.
And then the Milwaukee Brewers, are they still around?
Yeah, they
They
moved
still
from the American
exist?
League to the National League, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
I thought Hank
and
Aaron had
it's funny.
something.
The funny thing about baseball is it not just long with the teams that went away is early in those days until you hit the '60s. Baseball was more of an East Coast and maybe Upper Midwest kind of a sport.
Oh yeah, Yeah. The
But in the
South didn't get.
'60s, they went out. It became full coastal thing because the Giants and the Dodgers both moved out to California,
Right.
and then they immediately had expansion teams, which became the San Diego Padres in '69, and of course they went to Canada with Montreal Expos.
Right.
And then they also had well, people won't recognize this probably. Used to be the California Angels, but they're the Los Angeles Angels, which I think they were originally Los Angeles Angels.
I don't know.
But
I don't
it
know.
went from being real local to completely expanded,
I
across
try
the
not
whole
to think
country
about
within
California.
a decade. And
Try not
you
to think.
also had at that time that you had some experiments with uniforms as well.
Yeah. The
Like,
A's.
the A's, the Orioles, and the Reds all wore these shirts kind of like this, and they wore them with vests, which you don't see anymore.
The swinging A's. They
Yeah,
call
the swinging A's, who also
the
moved
white
from
shoes.
Kansas City to Oakland during that time, and now
Yeah.
they've moved again to Las Vegas,
Where were the Atlanta Braves? Weren't
Milwaukee.
they Milwaukee? See, that's what I was thinking. The Brewers turned into
Originally, they were Boston, though.
Milwaukee. Yeah. Yeah.
Boston,
Yeah.
and then Milwaukee for a short time.
And then the South beckoned and
Yeah,
finally got some
second.
baseball
Yeah.
teams in the South, Atlanta primarily. But, you would think New Orleans would have had a baseball team somewhere along the line,
Yeah,
but
but they never have. It's
never
kind of
have.
weird.
NBA, NFL, but never had that. Anyway, uh, my flashback to the old days or just how things have changed or how you have to kind of be it's kind of weird. You look up and you were a young guy all your life, and all of a sudden you just turned into such an old guy that you remember things that people who are alive now in their 20s and 30s can't even conceive of,
No.
like or can't remember the differences or don't even know it was like that. But I remember being in high school, and we would we both played football, and like most Southerners did, most Southern males play football at some point, or at
Mhm.
least go out for the team in middle school and decide
Yeah.
it's not for them or something. But when I played in high school, and I guess maybe you as well, I don't know, they had these the football helmets were so different. I remember
Yeah.
I had a very narrow 2-bar face mask that kind of hung
Yeah.
down and whole face hanging out, which
Oh yeah.
might explain some of my mental issues now. But my those twitches, those odd twitches I had, and you had what were called suspension helmets. There was this little leather pad
Yeah.
inside top of the helmet with strings coming out of it. Did you have those?
I've
Or,
worn one, but we had pretty decent helmets. By the time I got in high school, they actually had come up with the really more protective bike brand of helmets,
with
which I
those?
don't even know if they make anymore. But those were the first ones that were really, really, you could air them up and all that stuff.
Oh man, and that's just in
But
a
I
few
always wore
short
a
years.
Rydell because I thought the bike helmets looked weird, like a cone head or something.
Isn't that
They
crazy?
look bizarre.
But when I was at the tail end of the suspension helmets, and prior to and that's what they had after the leather helmets that
Yeah.
everybody's seen the picture. Seems like people have better memories of the leather helmets,
Mhm.
at least from seeing them in movies and such, than they do of the suspension helmets. But for a while there, if you were wearing a suspension helmet, you could look at anybody who played football and tell they played football, because when you got hit on the helmet would crash down around your nose and cut your nose. And everybody
Oh,
who played football had a cut on their nose that some guys to this day have that scar.
I
Grown
don't have
ups.
a scar, but I've never played a football game where I didn't get a slice across my nose and I had blood going down both sides of my
Oh,
nose. Every game
hey,
I ever played.
hey, Ron, nothing did it like those suspension helmets, though.
No.
It was almost like they were designed to guillotine down onto your nose on
It
every
wasn't just
play.
suspension. My Rydell bashed down too.
Oh man, those things
But the
were.
way I wore my helmet was probably because of that, because I didn't like the having to pull it. I like where I could just get my helmet like a hat and just go, pow, and
Well,
put it on.
and something else, we didn't have mouthpieces. Well, we did. We
Yeah,
did. They
I
just
had
started
mouthpiece.
having, but they weren't required. But most
Yeah,
of us had them, and
yeah.
they were just starting out when I was playing in high school with the mouthpieces. and they've gotten a lot more sophisticated now. But you still see some kind of old style mouthpieces. And so you're running around with a mouthpiece and your helmet crashing down onto your nose, and your shoulder pads were gigantic. And just football was it gets it changes all the time as far as the equipment, and your pants were never quite right. When I was playing, you wore knit pants. The materials your jersey were made out of was made out of was usually cotton, just plain old cotton.
Yeah.
And as the game went on, your jersey would get more and more loose. Now they have these really wonderful, super tight jerseys that probably takes 3 people to put them on. But boy, once you got them on, everything's all tight and fitting like it ought to and hanging on. You don't have
stuff. Yeah.
You don't
I
have
just
those
wore
huge,
mesh. You
don't have those huge shoulder pads or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that was just what we put up with. And but anyway, go ahead. What's your other thing you're going to talk about?
The
equipment
fit too was so bad on the pants that most people that had played very much had gotten to a point where they didn't even want to play unless they had a roll of tape and could tape all the pads down and stuff.
Yeah, we
because
tried
that girdle thing. I didn't like the way it slid around when I moved, so I would always have tape and and run tape there and run tape on the thigh pads and tape down the all the pads pretty much.
I don't
didn't
think
like them moving around.
I don't think anybody wears the girdle pads anymore, the hip pads.
Yeah, I don't think they do. I think they're all
tiny.
They don't wear them or. Yeah. I see guys in NFL now, they don't even have hip pads and stuff.
No, they don't.
And knee pads. They'll have them cut up above their knee. I'm like, man, you guys are crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I had to have my own pads. But anyway, what's your other topic that you were going to talk about? Or were you?
Well, I'm just going to kind of stay in some of that general area about defunct teams and stuff. Like the very first one I thought of for football is the Houston Oilers.
Oh, yeah. That's
probably the one I missed the most. I just missed the Houston Oilers. Yeah. I loved that when they brought back those uniforms and wore them this year. That was great. The little Love You Blue uniforms.
They're the Tennessee Titans now.
Yeah. And it's just not the same. Even but it's funny, like the Titans have kept on that tradition of Houston changing their dead gum helmets every 5 years.
Yeah,
because the Oilers started out, they had baby blue helmets with the derrick.
Right.
They wore those for about 5 years, and they went, let's go to silver now. We're gonna wear silver with a red and blue derrick on the side. Then they went, let's go, royal blue. We'll go with that. Yeah. Then they went, we don't like that. Let's go white. They always did that. They always swapped around. And the Titans do the same thing.
Yeah, I like traditional helmets that I'm not a big Green Bay Packer fan, but I'm a fan of their helmet. Yeah. They've had the same helmet forever. And it is something to Pittsburgh, same thing. The Bengals, same thing.
Well, the Saints hadn't been around that long, but who had ever thought that people would throw it when people start talking about classic uniforms? They always throw the Saints in there now.
Yeah,
because they've been pretty close to the same uniform ever since they've been around.
They've never changed the fleur de lis on the side of the helmet. Yeah. Sometimes
they'll go with tweaks, but it's still pretty much the same.
Yeah, yeah. And I like that. Yeah. I think they should. We like that. By gum, we like things to stay the same.
We don't like that stupid black helmet in there this year, just for, I don't know. I'm not sure why, but
for fun, just for fun.
Yeah, just fun.
Have a little fun. It's okay to have a little variety from time to time, but gravitate back to that tradition. Yeah. I'm a big fan of that. I was going to talk just a minute here, Ron, about something that we've both done and we're big fans of is track and field. That has seen dramatic changes.
Oh yeah.
When I was in high school, we ran big meets on what were called cinder tracks. It was just a little crushed up, I guess, rock or different little materials.
I really ran on a cinder track ever.
Oh well,
they were, but not cinder.
Listen, they were disappearing. They were disappearing when I ran. We ran the state meet on the synthetic track. And but they were still around. When I was in junior college, we ran on a cinder track, and in fact, we went on a cinder track that was shaped like a D. It only had one straightaway on it, and it had one big giant curve. And people did the track itself was put together pretty well, but it was cinder's not quite dirt, but it's pretty close to dirt.
Yeah.
And I know guys that were hurdlers and events where you fell. Hurdlers particularly, they would get little chunks of cinder up under their skin, and it'd stay under there for the whole season. They couldn't quite get it out. There was no point because you get it out, and a little bit later you were going to fall and get more under there, so they just let it go. And so the hurdlers were the guys with the bumpy knees. Shoes, excuse me, shoes were a little different, but not too much different. I mean, still had spikes and all that. The materials have changed, but you would expect that. But man, people like pole vaulters and high jumpers, they jumped in when I was in high school. They jumped in sand or piles of sawdust.
Yeah.
When you competed in the high jump, and you see old Olympic videos. Even in the Olympics, they jumped in sand. And then after that, there were these big like fish nets that you stuffed full of scrap pieces of foam rubber and put them out where the high jumpers were and put them out where the pole vaulters were.
Yeah.
And I personally never saw anybody really get hurt. You'd think that kind of thing would kill you, but I guess it didn't. And now, of course, you've got really nice all-weather tracks. A lot of high schools have them, and they're rubberized, and they're a great surface, and they're a consistent surface. And a lot of high schools now are playing on artificial surfaces. A whole lot.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's that like they use in NFL where they drop the little rubber chunks down in there, and it's all kind of looks like grass and stuff.
Well, you know why they went to
I've actually watched somebody build those one time. I was living right next to where they were building a practice field like that and watched them build it. Yeah.
Well, they a lot of people like them. A lot of schools like them because they're kind of cost effective. You have to redo them about every 10 years, but you don't have to cancel any games anymore. Mm-hmm. All of your sports can practice out there. There's somewhere in tear, but not a whole lot. Your soccer teams and your really anytime baseball will get out there on a real bad day.
Yeah.
What?
Don't have to mow them. Yeah.
Right. Well, that's a big attraction. That's a big attraction for recruiting assistant coaches, because that used to be the job that fell to assistant coaches, was mowing the grass and lining the field off before the big game. You don't have to do any of that anymore if you've got the artificial surface. Now, some teams still play on grass, but it's fewer and fewer and fewer, and that's a big change. But it lets you practice more consistently. The only downside, really, to it is that it's so doggone hot down on the surface. So in the South, it's ridiculous. But the coaches have gotten so good about keeping players hydrated, even that isn't much of an issue anymore.
You were talking about the high jumping and stuff over into sand and stuff like that. You made me think about, just the other day, I was watching some clips of Wilt Chamberlain competing in college track meets. High jump. I mean, there was some really nice footage. It was kind of awesome. Watching him jump and go into those sand pits and stuff, and
Wilt Chamberlain always said that track and field was, for a long time, his favorite sport. Eventually, that evolved, and he became a big volleyball guy. But really enjoyed volleyball. Sponsored a professional women's league for a few years. I think it went. Well, I know it went under.
Well, the clip was calling him the greatest athlete in history. And if you watch some of those clips, you kind of got to go, he's got to be right up there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He claims he could have won some gold medals in the Olympics, and I don't doubt it at all.
And he was really fast too. They were showing him he was really fast.
Well, there was this old legend that he and some teammates, when he was in college, of course he was a basketball player in college, were watching the Olympics, and they were watching the high jump, and after the competition was over, it was at night, and Wilt and some of his teammates, he said, "Hey, let's go out to the track. I bet I can beat the winning height in the Olympics." And supposedly Wilt went out there, they put a bar up, and he jumped higher than they had just watched somebody win an Olympic gold medal. And I don't doubt that at all. He's 7 feet tall.
I heard one of his teammates, who was Johnny Mathis, by the way.
Yeah.
The famous singer.
Yeah, that's right.
Told the story about him, and he said he saw him break the world record.
It was pretty interesting. So that's old school stuff, though. I don't know if you can do that now. I mean, they've gotten the high jump record up so high that.
I saw him triple jump on a cliff, which was awesome.
That would be natural for him. What do you got? You got anything else to wrap us up on? But that's just some old school things, and real old school. And if you lived and saw it, it makes you sound like you're 107. So This is our
Well,
107 year
one
old
thing
night.
that I can bring up that's happening this baseball season, that's a whole reminder from the 1969 Orioles uniform package. The Orioles are bringing back their absolutely horrifying uh, orange top and matching pants uniforms. Orange,
But
man, they look like a bunch of guys trying to flag down a airline or something.
hey, is it really though? Are they any more horrifying than anything that the University of Oregon football team wears about half the
No.
time? So they're right in state. I'm telling you, everything old's new again. It's just
Yeah.
I don't think they're ever going to go back to cinder tracks. I don't think they're ever
Mm.
going to go back to pole vaulting into sawdust. But some things do come back, and the old time. You remember Mike Tyson? You remember he always wore the plain black boxing shoes with no
Yep.
socks. You know,
Yep.
sometimes things like that come back, and you sort of like to see that. I'd love to see a basketball team, play a game in Converse high tops.
Yeah.
That would be pretty cool. I think just for fun, but yeah, you'll never see it. Maybe you will. Let's cross our fingers and hope, Ron. Boomer Bongo Boulevard, reminiscing about sports. We may do this again in a week or two, but it's been fun, and we could do this for hours. But
Oh yeah, absolutely.
nobody's going to watch it even for 20 minutes. So let's face it.
Yeah, who are we
Boomer
kidding?
Bongo, Ron, I'm out. Are you
All
out?
right, I'm out as well.
Okay.